This is the Mazda 2 Sedan, and it is a B-segment sedan. Now, the thing is, B-segment sedans are very popular in this country. You have cars like the Toyota Vios and the Honda City, which are ubiquitous on Malaysian roads, and then you have vehicles like the Nissan Almera Turbo, which are set to shake up the industry. But the more often forgotten contender is this, the Mazda 2 Sedan. And that is for two reasons. One, this car is fully imported, which means that at over 100,000 ringgit, this is easily the most expensive way to get into a B-segment sedan. Second, as you can see, it's not all that large. The pearl white paint may deceive you, but it's actually not a very large car at all. In fact, the boot of the Mazda 2 hatch is smaller than what you get in a Perodua Axia. So, it makes the Mazda 2 sedan a very difficult sell. But Mazda says that there is a reason why this car is as pricey as it is. This is a premium offering, a cut above the rest, and it justifies its price tag. So today in this review, we're going to find out if they're lying. My name is Aiman I, Abdullah, this is the Mazda 2 Sedan, and this is a Malaysian Motoring review. So talking about the exterior, the Mazda 2 has locked itself, but it has quite a few refinements up front for the new model year. So for starters, you get these smarter new headlights where you have LED main beam and LED high beam. You also get a daytime running light that goes around here, which is kind of sweet, but the indicators are still bulbs. It just kind of annoys me a little bit for reasons I can't quite explain. You have a larger, more prominent grille, which is framed by a larger, more prominent chrome strip that goes from one end to the other. You also get a chrome strip down below, which takes the place of the fog lights. Because Mazda believes that you don't need fog lights in this country, it looks better if there's a little bit of chrome instead. Going down the side, you have wheels, because cars come with wheels. 4 of them, usually, sometimes 5. And these are 16-inch wheels finished in this lovely gunmetal finish, and they are wrapped in Dunlop low resistance tires for better fuel economy, which I find a little bit strange because Mazdas are supposed to be about zoom. It's about the driving experience, and so wrapping it in low resistance tires kind of feels a little bit counterintuitive. But anyway, going down the side, you have wing mirrors, because those are legally mandated, even though most Malaysian drivers don't use them. You get keyless entry with a button, which I guess is fine for a B-segment saloon, even if it is an expensive B-segment saloon. You have rear doors, because those are also necessary. And then the bodywork kind of keeps going. Now, it's not a secret, I'm not a fan of the saloon. I actually prefer the Mazda 2 hatch, because I think that the design of that is a lot more resolved. But, so there's a lot of metal here, for reasons I can't quite explain, but whatever. At least down the back, the design is very resolved. So you do have a slightly refined set of taillights, which unfortunately are still all bulb. All bulb. You get a new rear bumper, which has this diffuser-like element, which does nothing. You get reflectors down here, which also do nothing. And you get a rear-mounted fog light down here. And you get a third brake light up here, which I have to point out because my video assistant thought that was the third brake light. Now, Mazda has retooled the way it badges its cars. So now, instead of just having a 2, you now get Mazda 2. So you know that you refer to this as the Mazda 2, not just the 2. On this side, you have SkyActiv-G, which talks about the engine. You have a 1.5 litre engine up front. I think it's direct injection, I'm not sure, I will correct this later in the driving portions, but this is a very important part of this car's experience, and we will talk about that during the driving portion. Now, while we're back here, we're going to take a look at the boot, which you can open from here. So, the boot space in here is not that large. If you're looking at a Honda City, for example, you will get more space back here, but it is a perfectly usable amount of space. More importantly, there is a very little lip here, and the space is square, which means you can pack this in quite well. You also get seats that are supposed to fold down, but they don't fall when you pull the thing, which I find really annoying, because like one little spring, like a 20-cent part, could make this feel a lot better, but whatever. And at least the boot can be released simply by pressing the button while keeping the key in your pocket. Some cars don't do that, but I appreciate that the Mazda 2 does. So now let's move on to the interior. Now, on the inside of the, on the inside of the Mazda 2, you can see again where Mazda tries to justify the expense. So you can tell in here immediately that this car is indeed a cut above the rest. For starters, when was the last time you walked into a B segment car and saw stitching on the dash and soft touch materials? I mean, this is properly squidgy. So your immediate perception is that this is a relatively premium car. You have these leather seats with this nice sort of contrasting bits here and a little bit of suede-like material down here. I believe this is some sort of microfiber. It's not Alcantara, despite what Webcar will tell you. But this is like a suede microfiber, which is quite nice if you ask me. Now, from the driver's position, there are a few things that you have to know. For starters, this instrument binnacle is absolutely brilliant. You have a centrally mounted tachometer with a little digital readout down the side for your speed, but you also have a heads-up display with your speed and navigation instructions pointed out there. You have a leather-wrapped steering wheel with paddle shifters. That's very useful, and you get, it's of course multi-function and all that nonsense. But the steering wheel is relatively thin, the rim, which means that you can hold on to it with a good degree of confidence. All the buttons and switchgear in here feel really nice too. All the buttons, I mean all the switches, everything in here feels premium, and all the buttons, everything feels good. You also get that suede-like material down here, and you get the MZD Connect system. I apologize for my cables. You get the MZD Connect controls down here, which means that when you're driving along, it's really easy for you to manipulate the MZD Connect system up here. Now, the screen is relatively small, I'll admit, but it's very, very high resolution, so you don't feel like you're losing out on anything. And more importantly, it comes as standard with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so you will not be using it that often anyway. Now, to talk about some of the finer things, this car comes with single zone climate control, but it doesn't come with a digital readout, which means you only have to guess sort of what temperature that you're at via a knob. You get these nice turbine style air vents on either side of the driver and one on the side of the passenger, but there is another vent here that's sort of built into this strip, which is an interesting design decision. I think it makes the car look really sweet, but it can take some people off guard because it's like, oh, where's the other thing? Or I might be overthinking this. The car also comes with a CD player, which is odd, I think. You do at least get a couple of USB ports down here, an SD card slot for the navigation, a 12-volt socket here, and that's about it. You do not get USBs in the back, which is very annoying. Oh, and you also get a proper handbrake that you use with your hand. What else? Oh, you get a sport thing. So you push it up and you go into sport, you pull it down, you're out of sport. Yes, so you can do that. And this is, admittedly, this is quite fun. In a Mazda, I expect to always see this because you want to have fun in a Mazda, don't you? Anyway, let's go look at the back where things are not quite as rosy. Now, in the back of the Mazda 2, as I said earlier, things are slightly less rosy. So for starters, this is in my driving position. I'm the national average height of 160 something, I think. You know what? Legroom isn't so great. My knees have about that much room, but more importantly, these seat bases are really flat, which means I have absolutely no under thigh support. I can push my feet in a little bit, but they really do go up all the way until the back rail of the front seat, which means it's not really that comfortable. But that aside, the rest of the space in here is not so bad. So I have a decent amount of headroom in the sedan. The hatch has slightly less headroom. I do get 3 separate headrests, which means that I can actually lean back and rest my head quite comfortably. And there are there are hard armrests, unfortunately, but at least you still get some of that suede-like material here, which means it's comfortable for you to rest your arm. You also get hard plastics up here, not so great, but at least the seats themselves are nice. You do get a couple of ISOFIX mounts, which are accessible via these little slots down here, which means it should be very easy for you to put in the child seat. But there's no rear armrest. I would have liked a rear armrest. It would have made living back here a little bit better. 1. 2, there are no rear aircon vents, which means you have to rely on the discretion of the front passengers to allow you to not suffocate and die in your own sweat. And most annoyingly, there are no USB ports back here. There aren't even cup holders on the doors. You have this bin with a weird separator thing, but there are only 2 cup holders between the 2 front seats, and that's it. Which means you're going to be warm, sweaty, thirsty, and possibly dying of dehydration. But aside from that, it is quite nice. Admittedly, again, the Mazda 2 has proven the fact that it is indeed a cut above the rest, just ever so slightly. But I suspect that Mazda's justification for this car extends beyond what you touch and feel. While fondling this car may be a lot of fun, I have a feeling that the value of this car is in its suspension and its driving experience. So let's go and feel how that's about. But just before I do, I'd like my camera assistant to pan out slightly, because I'd also like to point out the last thing before we move on to the drive, and that's the fact that this window doesn't go all the way down. So if you are the type that likes to keep their arm out, you're not doing that in this. Anyway, let's go to the drive. Right, so now we're behind the wheel of the Mazda 2 Saloon. Now, it's worth noting that the Mazda 2 Saloon apparently drives differently from the hatch. We're not entirely sure how, and having never driven the hatch, we can't really attest to what that difference is, but we're going to focus this review on the Saloon itself. So, as I said earlier, at over 100,000 ringgit, the Mazda 2 Saloon is easily one of the most expensive options in the local B segment, but it does try to make up for it in two areas. One is the quality of the cabin, which we've talked about earlier, but the second area is in terms of the drive. So Mazda prides itself on its zoom philosophy, where the idea is that cars should be rewarding to drive, even when they are as sedate and as humble as a B segment saloon, something that we would drive every day. But for what it's worth, this car does deliver on that promise rather well. The 1.5 litre engine is very similar to what you get in competitors, but somehow it feels so peppy and responsive that it eggs you on to drive perhaps a little bit more aggressively than you should. But despite that, it is still very refined. It's very rev happy, like every Mazda engine tends to be. But more importantly, it still manages to be relatively efficient. I've been driving this car for now about 300-ish kilometers. It is, after all, during MCO, which means I can't go that far. But despite relatively aggressive driving and some traffic and so on and so forth, the car is still averaging well over 13.9 kilometers per litre, which is very good, given the fact that this is a relatively heavy car. And the engine is always so happy to perform. But so as I was talking about the powertrain, so you have a SkyActiv-G 1.5 litre up front, 4-cylinder engine paired to a 6-speed automatic gearbox in the middle. You do have flappy pedals, which means that you have a little bit more control when you're driving intently. But for the most part, you can just leave the gearbox to do its job for you, because it does it so well. I apologize for the motorcycle going past. Anyway, so again, it's very clear that compared to the competitors, this is definitely a more driver-focused vehicle, and the chassis plays well into that as well. It's very balanced. The suspension setup is perfect for Malaysian roads. It's never crashy. It's very communicative. You always know what the car is doing, but at no point does it feel like you are compromising in terms of comfort in order to get that level of communication. The steering is also very communicative. Even though this is an electrically assisted power steering, like most modern cars, it feels very communicative. You always know what the front wheels are doing, and as a result, you can drive this car relatively confidently. It also helps that the throttle response in this car is absolutely brilliant, because it means that at any time you can just, and off you go. It's so peppy, and it eggs you on to drive a little bit more intently, as I said earlier. But it doesn't compromise in terms of comfort. Even in the back, it never feels crashy, it never feels uncomfortable. This car feels incredibly well sorted, and it is as a result of having a very well sorted chassis. But all of that comes at a price. Again, over 100,000 ringgit, you would expect this car to feel relatively complex. You want this to feel like a mature vehicle, which it does. And even at highway speeds, this car feels very, very well sorted. But there is a compromise. What we've seen in the modern B segment, saloons especially, is that active safety has played a much larger role in modern cars. The Toyota Vios, the Honda City, and the Nissan Almera Turbo all come with active safety on some variants, if not all. So you would expect things like blind spot monitoring. You would expect things like autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, and so on. Unfortunately, this car doesn't have any of that, which I understand it has 6 airbags, it's got fabulous crumple zones and whatever, but active safety is an important factor in a modern car. Having an extra pair of eyes looking out for you for when you might sneeze, or you might be ever so slightly not paying attention to what's in front of you, it can save your life, or at least mitigate the damage in the event of the worst. And the fact that this car has absolutely no active safety whatsoever is unforgivable. But we do believe that Mazda is trying to work on it as best they can. Unfortunately, the Mazda 2 is now getting a little bit on in terms of age, which means that perhaps a newer model may be able to address this. But until that model arrives, it is difficult to live with a car like this that doesn't have any sort of active safety features. Now, to conclude, to better understand this car, it's really simple. If you are the sort of person that is willing to put drive above all else in terms of driver enjoyment, driver feel, and the overall engagement with a car, then the Mazda 2 is the car for you. But like I said, it comes at a compromise. If you want the best bang for buck, unfortunately, this isn't it. One, it's too expensive. Two, it doesn't offer everything that you would expect from a B-segment saloon. On top of that, when you look at the relatively compromised practicality aspects of the rear space and the boot, it makes this car a difficult sell for those who simply are not drivers. But Mazdas are made for drivers, and so if that is you, and if you are willing to make that compromise, nothing will satisfy you quite like a Mazda 2. And if you're not, there are plenty of other options out there. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to stay notified every time we make a new upload. Follow us on all of our social media channels linked in the description below. Stay safe, stay well, stay healthy. I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao.